Let's just pick up a discussion on what the ANC in the documents refers to as the second transition, Mr. Kotongwane. What does that mean?
We come from an environment where we have been, the first phase of our transition, focusing on consolidating democracy in our country, creating the institutions which are necessary for a proper democracy to function, and make sure that those institutions are in place, whether you talk about an independent judiciary and a vibrant and vigilant parliament which exercise oversight, and creating a whole range of institutions, whether it's a public protector. We've created an environment where our democratic, our democracy, we can say, is stable. We have been unfortunate on the economic front. I must say, it's incorrect to say we've not achieved anything. We've achieved anything despite all odds. There has been some problem on the economic front. You will remember 2 years in government, the ANC confronted what was called the Asian financial crisis, which had serious implications on this economy as well. We tried to grow this economy, as you can see, on average, between 1994 and 2008, average about 3.8 growth levels, picking up employment from 2000 to bringing new about 2 million people into the employment. Unfortunately, the global crisis hit us back and kind of reversed the gains that we've made. So it's not that we've not made the gains. So what we're trying to say, the main focus now, having achieved a democratic consolidation, what we need to do is to begin to focus on socio-economic transformation.
But let's talk about these gains. Of course, you say that some employment had been created, but people will argue that ever since the ANC came into power, it hasn't been able to reduce the unemployment rate to anything less than 20%. It's always been stubbornly above 20%. If you take, and on an expanded definition, it's even worse in terms of how many people are out of work. You're looking at over 4 million people who are eligible, who are out of work in this country.
Let me just give you an indication of the nature of the structural crisis. What we inherited is an economy which was facing structural crisis. Just give you two sectors which are labor absorbing. Between 1975 and 1975, the mining, what is called the agricultural sector, employment declined from 2 million to about 900,000, and from the mining industry from closer to about 600,000 to about 353. What I'm trying to say is that those industries which are labor absorbing have been declining, not necessarily since 1994, before 20 years before the ANC took over. So we've got that structural crisis, and the most of these people who were losing jobs were basically unskilled. So that's where the problem is, and you're beginning to see growth in the manufacturing sector without the requisite skills being available in most of our people.
But the argument, sorry, Mr.
It's a structural constraint.
Yeah, but the argument, Mr. Kotongwane, is that when the ANC then took over this economy with its structural defects, never changed anything, and that is why then this economy has continued to fail the majority of the people of this country.
It is inaccurate to say never change anything. The growth levels we've witnessed between 2004 and 2008 unprecedented in this economy before the 70s. Growth levels that it is even during apartheid they witnessed during the 60s. So you can't say...
But Cosatu has always said those growth levels were jobless growth levels because they weren't accompanied by a significant number of new jobs.
Look, for me, I'm saying there are structural constraints. I'm not saying the levels we've achieved in growth are the ones that would have been reasonable in the circumstances. Everyone agrees that the job problem, particularly its impact on youth, is still a serious challenge. That's why we are all agreed that that's a major focus moving forward.
Let's talk about, because some people may argue also that what the ANC has not done is to create a policy implementation conference, if you will, because part of our problems in this country has always been about implementing policy as opposed to coming up with policy. And I was just looking at my notes for the NGC, even Polokwane, some of the resolutions about the economic growth. Polokwane resolution talking about accelerating economic growth, transforming the quality of the growth, and that the most potent weapons against poverty being the creation of decent work by growing the economy faster. These are some of the notes that I took in 2007. The discussion documents are saying pretty much same things.
Let me just say, I mean, again, you're absolutely correct. The issue of implementation remains an enduring problem. Remains an enduring problem. If you look at the Polokwane resolution, for instance, the economic section of that resolution, if you look at the resolve part, the first issue that we're saying in that document is, in fact, we must create a technical, administrative and organizational capacity of the state to be able to deliver the needs. Already we identified that as far as policy is concerned, where we have perfect policy, our very difficulty is the capacity of the state, the enduring problem, the capacity of the state to implement. It's a matter which is given consideration. The NDP talks about a capable state. How do we begin to achieve that? Those are challenges that are confronting us or beginning to confront.
Another issue that I would like us to, before I go to the emails and the SMS, is the issue of land reform. It's a highly hot issue in South Africa. What are the proposals?
Look, I mean, the key proposal is the notion that the willing buyer, willing seller issue is effective. We've got people speculating with land and so on and so on. And among the key proposals then is that in order to deal with this speculation and have kind of a reasonable price, you need to create an institution of a valuer general who's going to make sure that it can override evaluation which are speculative. The second of issue is the wage commission, which is going to be, not the wage commission, I'm taking my label now, is the
land management commission.
Land management commission was main focus would be largely audit, investigate, make adjudication on those issues. So there's a focus in getting. There's an intention to grapple with the land question, but people must take into account one of the document. One of the things we're saying in the document on second transition is we must look at the balance of forces at the time we're taking over. There were things we could do, there were things we could not, precisely because of the balance of forces at the time. And we think that the balance of forces, given the consolidation of democracy in our society, the scope is there to do a number of things. We didn't march to Pretoria and take over. There's a distinction between kind of storming the wall and taking over Pretoria. The nature of the negotiation was such that we were in a stalemate. We were fighting with the enemy. We didn't necessarily defeat them at the time. They didn't defeat us, and we had to find one another. And therefore, the product that it made in the circumstances was a product of compromise. That's what negotiations are about.
What then happens going forward with regards to that compromise?
Well, what we are saying is that now we've got a South African society with a stable democracy which is consolidated. The key challenge is socio-economic transformation. And what the key issues about that, amongst them is the management of the national resources. We've got to take that issue as a critical thing. Land is but one of the most aspects of it.
All right, let me bring in the professor. Professor Maluleka, then your thoughts on some of the documents that are out there. Do you get a sense that they respond to some of the pressure that is out there, among others from the ANC Youth League, for instance?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the ANC is really under the pressure of incumbency because on the one hand, they have a vast majority of people who are saying, we've given you political power. You have not used that political power for socio-economic transformation. Certainly, we haven't felt it, and those would be the voices of poor South Africans who remain unemployed. 20 years later, the unemployment rate still is above 20%. That's the one pressure that is coming, and if you look at the number of so-called service delivery protests over the past 6-7 years, you will know that there's a very strong message being sent to the ruling party. So they have to respond to that, and not just your Malema position necessarily. Of course, that also, but I think there is a general sense that the possibility is there that the general citizenry may lose patience. In fact, is already losing patience insofar as they are not feeling the effect of the changes that have been here. But they have a very difficult job in their hands, because on the one hand they've got that majority of people. They also have much more powerful smaller minorities who are almost saying to them that what you have now is okay. In fact, it's not good enough for us. We would want a much more market-driven economy. So there are competing demands on the ANC, and you could say that some of their documents are quite brave in some of the proposals that are coming through, but being caught in the middle, they could be making proposals that will not go far enough for the poor, but documents that could go far enough to anger the rich, and they have to navigate that middle ground, which is very, very difficult.
Is it true, Mr. Konowan?
And you have already had your Azapos and others saying none of these will go far enough unless they simply go, now that you have political power, go to the Constitution, amend it accordingly, and make sure that you are able to implement these things that you are talking about.
Professor, because I wanted to bring you back then about perhaps examples of what you refer to as brave policy proposals that may be contained in some of these documents.
Well, of course, it's a matter of opinion, and there will be contestation about whether these documents go far enough. It is brave from some people's perspective. I mean, for example, the whole attempt to revamp the land reform discourse and the land reform instruments in the country could be seen, certainly you have had the DA responding, as something that is reckless, that will lead to land grab and so on. The departure from, proposed departure from willing buyer, willing seller could be seen in those lights. But, as I say, it depends on from what perspective. I think the poor people of this country will say that those proposals do not go far enough, firstly, but secondly, they will be very skeptical about the implementation aspect that you were talking about a moment ago. That we've had these noises before. Does the state have the capacity and the will to implement these things, or is it simply proposals that are being made to buy time? One has had also references to the Reserve Bank, but already you hear double messages and backtracking. I mean, I heard, for example, when the minister was making the announcement that no, we don't want to amend any constitution, we're not going to touch the Reserve Bank at all. So you can feel the pressures, and in fact, what is telling is that until now, the most vociferous groups have been the powerful groups, with the poor until now being very silent. Of course, perhaps the only avenue left for them is protest.